Swartbooi, you have the floor.
Members, Namibia is facing a major crisis of 30 years of cumulative economic mismanagement. The economic and social policies of the governing party have not in any significant measure improved the lives of the majority of Namibians. The vast majority of Namibians are confronted by poverty, inequality and unemployment and cannot see their way to a different and better life. Election after election, the elite make promises to the people of this country which they never fulfill. They make these promises while they have enriched themselves through the plunder of state resources, both natural and financial, and they have co-opted key state institutions that are supposedly watchdog instruments, such as the ACC. Moreover, segments of the police, the military, and the intelligence services were converted into compliant organs in the advance of corruption. Segments of the judiciary forms an important bastion of the hegemonic legitimization process, together with some academics who are part of the historic bloc, as Gramsci refers to them. This is the deep state that operates in Namibia. Honorable Speaker, the above corrupt practices have decapitated the Namibian state from becoming a true liberating force of the people of this country. In the absence of any political equilibrium, the looting machine sitting over there, the ruling elite, strengthened their hold onto the treasures of the state, as confirmed by one deputy minister recently, and I quote her, that we control the cake, end of quote. Honorable Speaker, the one-party rule of Namibia for 30 years has collapsed the economy. They have made young people, young graduates, street dwellers without work and business opportunity. Gender and child insecurity coupled with the demise of the agricultural sector, the explosion of the informal settlements in urban areas, and the underdevelopment of the rural economy has become the order of the day. Without shame, 5,000 fishermen were pauperized in Wolfish Bay, and they are still struggling for labor justice as we speak. And at the same time, as they were pauperizing these fishermen, the fishing sector became the private business empire of the elite, and to date, no change of tack has happened. It is within this context that the LPM offers its reply to the Honorable Shimi's budget. I must, Honorable Speaker, from the onset of my commencement, state that I have found Mr. Shimi to be a decent man. He also sings quite a lot in the Catholic Church, and I respect him very much. But as a Minister of Finance, I've said this to him, I differ completely with him. Honorable Speaker, the 2020-2021 budget focuses on key goals, namely safe lives, safe livelihoods, safe jobs and incomes, and to place Namibia into a stronger position to thrive in the foreseeable future. The budget is themed defeating COVID and together thriving again. Honorable Speaker, honorable members, in the public space, words have meaning and they have impact. For this reason, political office bearers must ensure that they strive at all times for philological precision. The theme, as well as the 4 key goals highlighted by the Honorable Shimi, are entirely contradicted by the allocations and the principles enunciated in his budget statement. Evidently ending his statement with a quote from Milton Friedman, Honorable Shimi has betrayed a deep-seated admiration in compliance with the ethos of Milton Friedman. Milton Friedman, in quick reflection, who departed for the celestial jurisdiction in 2006 at the age of 94, was known by some as the godfather of free markets. He was a staunch neoliberal economist of the past, a monetarist, arguing for totalitarian free marketism. Friedman claimed that only markets work and only the market is correct. Friedman loathed government interventions in the economy. These theoretical and practical prescripts from the Friedmanian thought are irrelevant, if not dangerous, for Namibia of today. Besides, where are the alternatives that Shimi speaks about, which he ascribes to Friedman to use a crisis as a way to generate alternatives? We would have, Honorable Speaker, expected Honorable Shimi to engage deeply and conscientiously with the thoughts and the values of the heterodox economists who are understood to build a coherent model of the economy based on realistic micro foundations that recognize that information and markets are imperfect. Honourable Speaker, sir, of concern is the ideological and historic bankruptcy of the ruling party. The basic document of the governing party states that it is a party of scientific socialism, yet its economic and social policy framework is neoliberal in substance. It is a glaring reality that former liberation movements across Africa have lost character and content of the historic mission of liberators of society, and to liberate society, therefore, from the vestiges of colonial economics and social oppression and underdevelopment. Honourable Speaker, in confirming the above assertions that I have made just now, late Professor Ben Turok, a former ANC member already in 1999, postulated, and I quote, that the ANC in government is ideologically centre-right and the ANC liberation movement is centre-left, end of quote. This expression by late Professor Ben Turok is applicable to the governing party in Namibia. The lack of ideological and political clarity is succinct. SWAPO has transformed from a vanguard to a rearguard party. Moreover, and sadly so, SWAPO's thoughts, according to Lucia Coletti, have become impoverished and erred over time. With a balance of forces entirely within its sphere for the past 3 decades, SWAPO has failed to transform our society. Therefore, Namibia today can be characterized as one country, 2 societies. The one society of the rich and prosperous elite and their class alliance with capital, and the other society extraordinarily poor, structurally excluded and disempowered members of this country. This dichotomy is not vexed. It is well understood in its historic origins. Its structural embodiments are known, and the resolution to these realities requires fearless, strong, resolute, and clarified leadership of character and content. As a centre-left movement party, we are deeply worried about the lives and livelihoods of our citizens and the disastrous impact of corruption, economic mismanagement, growing inequality has and will have on the current and future generation. Honourable Speaker, I now turn to some specifics. First, trade, industry, labour and employment creation. The appropriation bill confirms the correct analysis of LPM that the government of Namibia has given up on industrialization as a key enabler for economic transformation. With an amount of 174 million, the MTI is not positioned to function as a conduit for industrialization. This trend is also invariably reflected in the allocation to the Ministry of Labour, Industrial Relations and Employment Creation of my good friend Utoni Daniel Nyoma, which receives 187 million Namibian dollars. The brutal factual truth is that the elite have surrendered to the reality that they are just unable to create jobs. The embedded political message to those Namibians searching for jobs is that this government is admitting that it can't deal with unemployment. Without jobs, the unbearable and humanly unsustainable material conditions of Namibians will not change. Economic transformation will not realize. Honourable Speaker, industrialization drive is dead. Growth at home, dead. New jobs, dead. The message is Namibians must remain in the abyss of poverty, malnourishment, and suffer in informal settlements. And as Thomas Hobbes said, Namibians' lives will remain solitary, poor, nasty, and brutish and short. The abandonment of industrialization and job creation suggests an epistemological erosion and an acknowledgement of the fundamental defeats on these frontiers. Agriculture, industry, jobs are the key harbingers that allows the individual to accumulate from below. It is well known that our secondary sector, Honourable Speaker, sir, has since 1980 plateaued at 10% of GDP on average. In this year, 2020, the secondary sector still remains at a 10% of GDP on average. Honourable Speaker, I move to emergency grant versus basic income grant. The reality of one country, 2 societies has been amplified by COVID-19 pandemic, where no income and low income brackets of people have suffered significantly more from the loss of income, livelihood, and self-sustenance tools. About 561 million was spent, according to the Honourable Shimi, for about 747,000 Namibians. Honourable Speaker, what the emergency grant, nonetheless, even though there is political disagreement, has demonstrated is that it is possible to introduce, therefore, a basic income grant. We may quarrel about the amount, the philosophy, who should and who shouldn't be granted, but our citizens' lives will at least be secured at some level. To this extent, we ask, in particular, Right Honourable Prime Minister Sarah Gumgelo Amadila, to critically engage the Honourable Minister to look at the introduction of a basic income grant right now, pegged at $750 Namibian for at least 24 months as a direct response to COVID-induced shocks in the labour market as well as the total economy. This, indeed, Honourable Shimi, responds to your thematic areas of saving lives, saving livelihoods, saving incomes, and thereby guarantee broader demand in the economy. I move to the demise of agriculture. Our agriculture sector carries the livelihoods of many Namibians in both the commercial and subsisting farming sector. In fact, Honourable Speaker, it is the largest employer in this country, employing about 157,000 people. The allocation given to agriculture and land as a unified ministry is a 1.3 billion worth 929 million as an additional amount for water, for the water sector. Now, while we are clear that our food sovereignty is in question as we produce only 40% and import 60% of what we consume, it is strange that such a small amount is given to agriculture. Furthermore, the drought that has wrought havoc and economic plunder upon so many in the sector should have been addressed as part of saving lives, saving incomes, and ensuring the economy thrives. For instance, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members, our view is that as part of addressing the drought, restocking of cattle, goat and sheep for farmers, especially in communal farming land, would have been a strong policy response, Honourable Shimi. This would allow people to recalibrate their income base. Honourable Speaker, you are a student of history. We must never forget that drought in Africa has historically been an existential threat to social cohesion and to social strength of communities. History teaches us that from the Xhosa to many tribes in East, Central and Southern Africa, that drought enabled colonialism to take root because societies of the continent were weakened financially and militarily. Droughts are not a joke. It is a threat to lives and livelihoods. Therefore, Honourable Speaker, the lightweight action by this government on many occasions on the measures to issue help for individuals that have lost livestock and other forms of income because of drought is a sad reality. It is not food that a farmer needs after drought. He or she requires the tools of his or her existence to be able to rebuild livelihood of self and of family. It makes common sense, to quote Honourable Gottfried Hage Kengo, to reboot the person with the tools of his or her existence before the drought came in to destroy livelihood. Food parcels are not the answer. It generates further dependency. Therefore, as LPM will record that an annual allocation of 5 billion to the agricultural sector is key to fast-track economic growth, agrarian reform, job creation, and food sovereignty. Although the sector has been declining for many years, its output, sector output in 2019 rose to 4.6 billion, up from a 4.2 billion in 2018. It has the biggest potential to create jobs and secure our people. It is our policy view as LPM that the agricultural sector be boosted to achieve a GDP contribution of 15% by 2026, up from the current 7% contribution of GDP. At present, being the largest employer, it means once that type of investment of 5 billion is made, employment for the thousands of Namibians would be an immediate matter. We move to land and agrarian reform. Indeed, the land question is an anchor socio-political and economic matter for LPM. Alongside boosting agriculture, the land reform program should be calibrated and a strong focus on smallholder farming should be made. In Kenya, in Zambia and other parts of East Africa, the movement is towards smallholder farming as a means of land reform. However, strong financial administrative support tilts the balance towards sustainable outcomes. This must be the route for land reform, Honourable Speaker, sir. Consequently, as a result of strategic decisions in Kenya, Zambia and other East African countries, agricultural output has increased. Combined with sustainable and strong agricultural development program, land reform should be located as part of the overall agrarian reform agenda to move society forward. The structure of our agrarian configuration must change, and we must diligently develop the agricultural sector for the sake of creating jobs and saving livelihoods. In this agrarian reform journey, we look forward to working with the Honourable Kale Schledwine and reach out our hand of cooperation toward redressing the past imbalances of land dispensation, the restoration of the dignity of those Namibians that suffered genocide, who lost land, and who were subjected to white racism, which prohibited land ownership to black Namibians, north, south, east, west, is an urgent and long-aspired human quest. The budget, therefore, falls short of the agrarian reform agenda. The polemic that land can only be given to those that have financial resources and that the poorer Namibians are unable and incapable of producing land is a stance of a madman, an imbecile who should be condemned by us all. Such anti-poor determinism against the vast majority of Namibians is toxic and nefarious in our democracy. Honourable Speaker, I move to the military security state. Honourable members, the post-colonial African state is vastly known as a gatekeeper state, created to protect the global and local elite financial and corporate interests, including by violent means against its own citizens if necessary. Namibia is following this trajectory and has increased its spending on the military, making the military the third highest budget item for a number of years now, and in this current appropriation bill totaling 6.2 billion. The wage bill, we are informed, of the military is at 4.5 billion. Question is, at a time of peace, we spent so much on the military. Why is that? The answer is in the concept of the gatekeeper state. LPM's approach is that the military be sent home, save billions on food and catering services to these personnel, and that such savings be used to fund limited operational expenses in the military, but also that those funds be deployed for other development programs, especially in agriculture, water, and rural poverty reduction programs. The militarization of Namibian streets and the traffic enforcement systems is one of the major legacies of Godfrey Kengop's presidency. Gross human rights abuses, unjustified limitations on freedoms and rights have been commissioned. This must come to a halt, Honourable Speaker. Again, in line with mathematic articulation of one country, two societies, the elite and the wealth of Namibians are exempt from the brutality of the military. The underprivileged and the structurally excluded Namibians bear the brunt of military hostilities daily. The police system also gets a 5.4 billion, deepening the systematic political logic of gunning up against civilians in case of an unrest due to economic and social crisis created over 30 years of one-party rule. We move to NAMRA, Honourable Speaker. By admission of the Minister of Finance in his budget statement, the revenue outturn for 2018-2019 of the state was as high, Right Honourable Prime Minister, as 98.6% of collection. Yet the government wishes to expend scarce resources in creating an additional structure known as the Revenue Agency, adding to the public sector wage bill, while preaching right-sizing of the public sector and the reduction of the public sector wage bill as an important government target program. Why, Honourable Sarah Gungelwa, Right Honourable Prime Minister, is this contradiction allowed? If your revenue collection capacity is intact and you are doing well in the collection of revenue, as you are claiming, why do you, at this particular juncture, Honourable Shimi, want to move and spend at least 210 million on creating a revenue agency? I particularly in this regard, Honourable Speaker, through you, plead to the Right Honourable Prime Minister, Honourable Sarah Gungelwa Madila, to pause the implementation of NAMRA and deploy the resources of 210.9 million to NASFAS to enhance the ability of our young people to enter education at UNAM and NAS and elsewhere. I move to international cooperation. International diplomacy in the maintenance of friendly relations are an important, well-established normative tradition of states and part of the Comity of Nations. Namibia has developed over the years respectable relations born from practical and political historic crucibles. However, Honourable Speaker, the maintenance of such relations has a price tag. And this price tag should be manageable and rationally connected to the economic objectives and interests of the country. Upon careful scrutiny from the economic benefit lens, Namibia has not gained meaningfully from the plethora of embassies it keeps on funding. It is either because the diplomats are unable to harness partnerships for foreign direct investment, or that the policy framework is not structured toward a sound economic diplomacy of action. Oh, it's both. Accordingly, Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members, the allocation of 1 billion to international relations and cooperation should be halved to 500 million, including the embassies, and that these resources be better applied to a well-timed basic income grant program. Honourable Sarah Gugungelo Amadila, Prime Minister of the Republic of Namibia. I move to public debt to GDP. The debt stock has spiraled out of control because of the years of mismanagement by this government that has depleted state coffers. The Minister of Finance is not clear nor convincing on how Namibia will be able to pay the debt over the medium to long term without compromising future growth. Debt now has increased from 54.8% of GDP to 68.7% of GDP without showing intent, very important, of how to stimulate the economy. In other words, Honourable Speaker, the obvious question is, you are borrowing, but what do you have to show for what you have borrowed? What are you showing for? What have you constructed? How have you stimulated the economy as a basis for going forward? Rising debt without accelerating economic growth, Honourable Speaker, will not be able to reduce unemployment and bring about economic prosperity that the Honourable Shimi talks about. There must be a balancing act. This requires a balance, striking a balance between funding the most productive sectors that drive economic transformation without leading the country into an unsustainable fiscal trajectory. I suspect we may be there already. Our Eurobond commitments are well known, and we are wondering whether we will be able to pay those commitments. I know that the Honourable Schledwein has saved up some resources to come to make those commitments last. Whether this will be done this year, given the exchange rate fluctuations and the poor performance of the rand against major currencies of the world, is a big question. Honourable Speaker, Honourable Members, our view is that the current appropriation bill is but a mere administrative budget that keeps on doing what has been done out of the established organizational culture and offers no clear, verifiable plan, Honourable Kapofi, to accelerate shared economic growth. No plan, nothing. Lastly, Honourable Speaker, I wish to state to the nation that we are in deep trouble, and only a change of guard will steer the Namibian ship in a fundamentally different and appropriate direction. The presence is strangled under Swartbooi, and the future of our children has been aborted by the one-party rule. Namibians, let's stand together for a just and egalitarian Namibia, free from corruption. As LPM, our political and economic program of action is hinged on building one country, one society. On that note, Honourable Speaker, I thank you.
Thank you.
I don't
Thank
support
you.
the